let's shift gears to recommendations. So although this is very alarming, and I don't try to be an alarmist with this, it is not too late. And we are not helpless. We can do stuff. Now that we know the negative effects, there are many things that governments can do, tech companies can do, schools can do, and parents can do. Parents can do individually, parents can do as groups. There's a lot of different things. And I know I've got curvilinear on here, but I'm going to talk about it in a minute as we get down. So I think with parents, we got to reframe the parental role in regards to the virtual world. We're overprotecting in the real world, and we're underprotecting in the virtual world. So we've got to somehow figure this out. I know, like me, I'm not a tech. I mean, maybe like you like me, I'm not a tech guy. I don't know all the apps. Kids can hide apps under the calculator. They can do all this stuff. I mean, kids could probably connect this water bottle to the internet. I don't know, right? But we have to figure this stuff out, and we have to increase our involvement with our kids and monitor what's going on. We have to assess what's, the amount of time they're spending in the virtual world versus the amount of time they're spending in the real world. And we have to start somewhere. We've got to set limits and have some guidelines, and then we have to enforce them. Research tells us 2 to 4 hours. And, if you listen to any like Steve Jobs interviews, and they were like, will you kids have smartphones? He's like, never. There's a Netflix special about the effects of Instagram. All those tech people, they say, do your kids have phones? They say, no way, not till they're 16. So, you may say, well, it's way too late now. Okay, but we know we have to limit their utilization. Otherwise, we're just being a permissive parent. And then, as the sleep studies show, and as Nancy, was it Nancy you said?
Nancy, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Nancy, knows really this idea of your kid having their phone all day, all night. I'm not sure that that's a great idea. Most people I know, most recommendations I see, there was a piece on CBS this morning recently with Jonathan Haidt and what's her name? A female psychologist who's considered a parenting expert. I forgot her name. It slips my mind, but I know she said flat out, no, the kids, all the phones are in by 8 o'clock every night, or 9 o'clock every night. The phones are in, the laptops are in, whatever is in, and it's checked into a place. So that they can go and self-soothe and decompress and then fall asleep. Reduce time spent and invested in the virtual world, and maximize time spent in real life. That means sports, clubs, groups, friends, meetings, jobs, activities. I mean, your kid, right? So I work with some people and they're like, yeah, my kid's a jock. This is not a problem. They're doing sports all the time. They're a scout. They're doing this. They're doing that. They're doing that. Okay, great. And so those are the types of people the kids living in 3D world, and he only visits 2D occasionally for entertainment. Okay, great. And then I have other parents that the kid lives in 2D, and we have to move them into 3D, right? Or they say, well, my kid's not a jock. My kid's a nerd. Okay. There's chess club, there's science club, there's robotics, there's this, there's that. There's all these different ways that we have to parent that we didn't have to. This is only like a decade. This is only like 12 years old. This is all brand new. So our parenting has to adapt as well, if that makes sense. We also have to accept the fact that this has impacted you. I know it's impacted me. We've got to model better self-control and expect the same from our kids. You can designate phone-free meals, phone-free activities, phone-free outings. I literally know of summer camps where phones aren't allowed. Kids get to decompress for a week or 2 weeks or 3, or however long they go to the summer camp. So we can talk more about this for sure, because I didn't want to spoon feed you solutions, because I don't know your relationship with your kid, but you do. You do. And if you don't know what your kid is doing online, you really have to try to find out. I'll talk with parents and I'll say, you know, your kid probably shouldn't have his phone all night. And they're like, yeah, I tell them it has to be here at 9 o'clock. And then when I wake up in the morning, it wasn't ever put there. Jeez. And I'm like, okay, so that's probably not a problem in your kid. That's probably a problem with parenting, right? And reinforcement and expectations and consequences. So we want to watch for addictive or problematic use and address it right away, ASAP. Because again, we have this failure to launch thing going on with boys, incel going on with boys. They only have one relationship and it's like with their mom. And so, I mean, you got to really watch for addiction. Addiction is between 7 and 10%, as defined by addictive. But if we look at other effects of addiction as dopamine, so the universal symptoms of withdrawal are when you remove it, there's increases in anxiety, irritability, insomnia, and dysphoria, which is what parents report to me and what people see when they remove phones from kids or when adults stop using their phones as much. Now, the good news is with teens, that tends to fade pretty quickly, 10 to 14 days. And then for the next 2 weeks, their mood brightens, their sleep returns back to better patterns. They engage more, they invest more, they're more actively involved in the family unit. So that's recommendations for smartphone and social media.
Excellent.
So let me go back. Hold on. The current linear relationship, right? So none is not very good. Probably at this point, it's not. We know it. I mean, it's part of their life, and too much is no good. So you have to find the sweet spot for your kid. Research tells us it's between 2 and 4 hours, right? So use that how you will. Okay, go ahead, Elizabeth. Sorry.
A few things. People have really been responding to this. One thing is Nancy Manning, my colleague, there's a site, www.thesocialdilemma.com. And I don't know if it was her or someone else who said a great documentary to watch with your teen. Another parent said, I noticed that when I reduce the screen time during the weekdays, my son is so obsessed with catching up on the weekends. And are there tips or studies or different screen time restriction strategies that we can employ? And also with that, Nancy, my colleague, she had 2 teens and now they're out of college, but as a family, to, again, practice what you preach, they had a central charging station in a drawer in the kitchen, and they all had to turn in their phones at a certain time and shut the thing and go basically offline. So that way it was all in one place, and then you could pick it up in the morning when you came down for breakfast. And that was really cool. But then another person said, thank you for bringing up this point about therapy. How do we find a good therapist? And he is going to speak to that in a sec. And what kind of therapist handles screen addiction? My older daughter went to therapy as a minor, and after her first visit, when I asked her how it went, she said the therapist says I don't have to tell my parents anything, and that did more damage to the family relationship than strengthening it. And so I have also had other therapists tell me they won't do family therapy, only individual therapy, etc. So he is going to talk in a minute about how do you find the ones that work well with teens in a way that's constructive for them and for the parent-child relationship. But if you want to mention anything else about that at this point, or if you want to wait, either way, what do you think?
Yeah, so remind me, therapy, we're going to address that specifically, and if I don't, then we'll talk more about that for sure.
Okay.
Okay. So to Nancy's point, in fact, I think that site is cited by Jonathan Haidt, the guy from Stern School of Business. He's involved in that. So again, there's a lot of information out there. So, but think about this. So by the time folks, sometimes they get to me, of course that drawer is the better idea. Of course, it's brilliant. However, you have to have compliance.
Mhm.
right? Which means you've had to formulate or cultivate your role as a parent with your kid, right? So, right. So I don't know, but a simple solution would be, oh, you didn't get your phone in the drawer last night, so now you've lost your phone for 3 days or something, right? I mean, there has to be, so again, this is the issue, or one of the issues. Parents are here and kids are here, or
No.
kids are here, kids are here, right? And that's not because we're power tripping. That's not because we're jerks. That's not because we're better than them. It's because that's our job, right? So when I work with people, a lot of times they'll say, yeah, I imposed that rule, but my kid doesn't do it. Or hey, what happens when you call your kid? Oh, my kid doesn't ever take. Kids don't take calls. I'm like, okay, but your kid should. If you told them, you will take my call every time I call you because I'm only going to call you in an emergency or something like that, right? So that's why I've tried to include all of this stuff, because it's not simply that. It's what is the role of the parent. So this is the perfect slide for this. To target independence, to target decision making, to target resiliency, not fragility, right? Did you know it's very popular in culture right now to say that the universities are indoctrinating kids, right? And I'm not trying to make a political statement, but do you know that the incidents, that the whole phenomenon of trigger warnings and safe spaces, that came from students demanding it from universities. This idea that universities will no longer invite fringe speakers because it upsets their student body too much. Universities, they have a long history of doing that. It's this cohort of college student that thinks they're fragile, that thinks I can't, if you disagree with me, that's a microaggression. It's not a disagreement, right? And so again, it's gotten into this whole thing of how did we get, when I did this presentation, there was a number of older therapists sitting in here and a couple of older staff. And all of the older ones said, the problem's parenting. It's not smartphones, it's parents. And I was like, oh, okay, but that's probably not it. But their perception as an older generation was, what has happened to parents? So we want to target independence. We want to utilize like a mastery model of parenting, which is all about competence. If you can handle this decision, then we're going to try this decision. If you can handle these two, then we're going to try this one. If you can handle this one, this one, this one, then we're going to try this one. If you can handle this one, we're going to do this one. Oh, you can't handle it, you messed up. That's okay. We'll go back to these many decisions. Oh, you've mastered it. Let's go up. Let's go up. So we're always trying to target self-sufficiency, choices, behaviors, right? When we simply target feelings, what are we reinforcing? Right? So I'm not saying feelings are unimportant. Not what I'm saying. I make my living off helping people with their feelings. But I am saying feelings aren't the most important. Right?
Right.
Choices, behaviors, attitudes, how you live your life. Those are the important things. A certain amount of teen angst is normal, right? It's a very difficult time. It has been for hundreds of years. So self-sufficiency, regardless of age. Your kid can do chores. Your kids can cook. And by cooking, that means you show them stuff and then you leave and they cook. Yes, they could burn the house down. Yes, they could burn themselves. Yes, that's true. But that's what cooking is, right? So they could cook for themselves. They can cook for the family. They can clean. They can do laundry. Yes, they could they could wreck the washer. They could wreck the dryer. They could wreck their clothes. That's true. But they could also learn how to be responsible, how to be self-sufficient, how to be resilient, running errands. If you've watched any of the Jonathan Haidt's stuff, he talks a lot about kids, walking to the store, shopping, running errands, and coming back. Okay, I know we don't walk to the store anymore, but he was in an urban environment. but you could drive your kid to the grocery store. You could give your kid a small list, and your kid could go in the grocery store and shop. I mean, there's so many ways to do this. Jobs, kids could get a little part-time job. I'm shocked at how when I'm working with teens who they just don't fit in anywhere, right? And then they get a little part-time job at like Jackson's Cafeteria or this or that or this or that. It changes their whole outlook in a relatively short period of time. Earning money, managing your own money. So managing your own money, yes, they could go blow it all. That's true. So you have to have some rules. But how do people learn the value of money? Not by saving it, by spending it. So you have to let your kid have some skin in the game. Buy things, responsibilities, anything that teaches responsibility, right? Leadership, anything that teaches leadership. One of the interesting things is back in free range parenting days is we used to hang out with groups of kids, and they were not homogeneous, they were heterogeneous. So there was older kids and younger kids. So older kids learned how to look out for younger kids. Younger kids learned how to follow older kids. And there's volunteering. So there's lots of different ways, and we can talk about more, but I just wanted to throw some out. Anything that's targeting independence, autonomy, identity development, self-sufficiency, we want to do. The concept of agree to disagree, right? The idea of that when you're a parent, you can do it any way you want to, but for now, I'm the parent, and this is my role, and this is my job. This is, if I don't do this, I'm being a permissive parent, and I'm being a bad parent. So that's recommendations for parents.
And can I just tag on one thing, just from the perspective of what we do? Academically, all the things that he's talking about encouraging ownership, self-sufficiency and all that, I encourage parents to be really mindful of that with their academics. And like he was saying, once they've established that they've got something, let them own it. And one thing, so a flag for me is when a parent is sitting with their 17-year-old and the parent still says, well, we have a history test tomorrow. We have a history test tomorrow. Did you not graduate? So there is no we. He or she has a history test tomorrow. So get the we out, but also to encourage that failure or struggling is not shameful. So instead of a student coming home or success isn't, something they do just to get your approval. So to get away from saying, oh, I'm so proud of you at every little thing they do, it's almost implying like they did it to please you. Instead, if they have a great grade, go, wow, that is really impressive. You must be really excited about that. What did you do to get that? And let them kind of wallow in it. Like, well, I did this and I studied and I made these flashcards, whatever. Awesome. Worked for you. Good job. So that's just transitioning it to they did it for them. But also if it comes in at a grade that's not great, rather than exploding and taking their phone and making it a big deal. And I'm so disappointed. This is a journey and they've got to learn resilience. So instead going, wow, I'm sure that's not what you were going for. You're typically, have stronger results than that. What do you think went wrong? How can you what do you think you underprepared? What would you do differently? Is there anything you can do to kind of salvage this, and all that? All right, well, good. Well, I know you're on it and figure out what went wrong. I know you're going to kind of put some thought into it and maybe talk to the teacher about what you can do. But, this is not defining you as a student. So learn from it and move on and not make failure or struggling shameful, because then they're not going to want to talk to you. So just a little note on that, but it kind of goes along with that self-sufficiency and ownership. But from an academic standpoint, that's where we see a lot of that come in.
Absolutely. And so like mastery model, like we had 2 kids. One didn't need a parent. He was born at 40 years old, didn't need a parent till he was like 12. Then I had one that was born who bent every rule till she was 12. And then she became a 40-year-old, grown up, and then she didn't need a parent. So for example, we realized early on that our kids were tired at night and they would go to bed and then they would wake themselves up. So suddenly we were like, you've mastered that. We never had to implement bedtimes or anything like that after like, I don't know, 5th or 6th grade, right? Homework, grades, the same thing. we'd say, how are your grades? Oh, they're good, or they're good. We could tell, yeah, they're really working and their grades were good. So then we didn't have to micromanage that. So, I mean, again, it's mastery. Now, let's say my kids weren't mastered that. Well, then I have to help them with that, right? I have to help until they can master that. And then we can move on to the next thing.